The Strait of Malacca is often described not just as a waterway, but as the jugular vein of the Asian economy. It is a narrow, winding stretch of sea sandwiched between the Malay Peninsula and the Indonesian island of Sumatra. At its tightest pinch point, the strait is barely 2.7 kilometers wide. Yet through this slender corridor flows the lifeblood of modern industry: crude oil. China, the world's largest importer of crude oil, brings in more than 10 million barrels every single day. A staggering portion of this energy, historically close to 80%, travels by sea from the Middle East and Africa, passing directly through this choke point before reaching China's eastern coastal ports. For decades, this maritime route was the undisputed artery of China's economic rise. But it also represented a profound strategic vulnerability known as the Malacca Dilemma.
The Myanmar Corridor, a land bridge to the Bay of Bengal. The concept behind the pipeline is deceptively simple on paper. Instead of sailing all the way around Southeast Asia to China's east coast, oil tankers from the Middle East and Africa stop short. They dock at Kyaukphyu Port on the western coast of Myanmar, facing the Bay of Bengal. There, the crude oil is unloaded into massive storage tanks and pumped directly into a pipeline that runs northeast across Myanmar southwest, crossing the border into China's Yunnan province, and finally terminating in the city of Kunming. This is not just a single pipe. It is a dual-system infrastructure project developed primarily by the China National Petroleum Corporation, CNPC, one of the state-owned giants of China's energy sector. The first component, a natural gas pipeline, began operations in 2013. It transports gas sourced from offshore fields in the Bay of Bengal and other regional imports. The second component, the crude oil pipeline, became operational in 2017. This oil line was the specific antidote to the Malacca Dilemma, designed to diversify supply routes and reduce maritime dependence.
While the map makes the route look like a straight line, the reality of its construction was a logistical nightmare. The pipeline stretches approximately 770 kilometers, 479 miles across Myanmar alone. When connected to China's internal domestic network, the total system spans over 2,500 kilometers, 1,554 miles, feeding directly into refineries and distribution hubs deep within the country. The scale of engineering required to move this volume of energy is immense. The crude oil pipeline has a capacity of roughly 440,000 barrels per day. To put that in perspective, that is enough oil to fuel a major industrial region independently. The parallel natural gas pipeline adds another layer of security, with a capacity of about 12 billion cubic meters per year. But moving fluids over such distances is not merely a matter of laying steel in the ground. It requires a complex ecosystem of supporting infrastructure.
Dozens of pumping stations keep the heavy crude moving against gravity and friction. Compressor stations maintain the pressure for the natural gas. Storage terminals buffer supply shocks, while sophisticated monitoring systems track pressure, temperature, and flow rates in real time. Any drop in pressure can slow the flow to a trickle. Any spike can rupture the pipe. Engineers had to design systems that could automatically adjust to these variables across hundreds of kilometers of varied terrain. And the terrain is formidable. The pipeline cuts through some of the most difficult geography in Asia. It traverses dense tropical forests, steep mountain ranges, and seismically active zones. In many remote areas of Myanmar, there were no roads to begin with. Construction crews had to build access roads just to bring in the heavy machinery needed to lay the pipes. They faced monsoon rains, landslides, and elevation changes that ranged from sea level on the coast to highland plateaus inland. Each kilometer presented a unique engineering challenge, requiring constant adaptation to environmental conditions that varied wildly from the humid coast to the cooler highlands.
So, how does this complex land route actually solve China's problem? The advantage is twofold: distance and security. Under the traditional model, an oil tanker leaving the Persian Gulf must sail across the Indian Ocean, navigate the congested and narrow Strait of Malacca, and then travel up the South China Sea to reach ports like Shanghai or Ningbo. This is a long, vulnerable journey. By diverting to Kyaukpu, tankers cut their journey short by thousands of kilometers. They avoid the congested waters of Southeast Asia entirely. Once the oil hits the pipe in Myanmar, it travels overland, bypassing the maritime choke points that are susceptible to naval interdiction. However, it is crucial to understand what this pipeline is not. It is not a replacement for the Strait of Malacca. China still imports the vast majority of its oil by sea. The Myanmar pipeline?
The risks of land, trading one vulnerability for another. While the pipeline solves the maritime vulnerability, it introduces a new set of risks. Pipelines are fixed assets. Unlike ships, which can change course or hide in open oceans, a pipeline sits in one place, exposed and immobile. If the line is cut, the flow stops immediately. Myanmar, the host country, has a history of political instability and internal conflict. The pipeline route passes through regions that have seen ethnic insurgencies and civil unrest. Sabotage, local protests, or broader political upheaval in Myanmar could disrupt operations. There are also environmental concerns. Leaks in sensitive ecological zones can cause long-term damage, and repairing a pipeline in remote, mountainous terrain is far slower and more difficult than repairing a ship at sea.
Additionally, the project has faced criticism regarding its benefits to the local population. While Myanmar earns transit fees and gains some infrastructure, critics argue that the economic benefits are skewed heavily toward China and the central government, leaving local communities bearing the environmental and social costs without adequate compensation. This creates a fragile social license to operate, adding another layer of risk to the project's longevity. The broader strategy: a web of energy security. Recognizing that no single pipeline is a silver bullet, China has not relied on Myanmar alone. The China-Myanmar pipeline is just one thread in a much larger tapestry of overland energy corridors designed to encircle China's vulnerabilities. To the west, China has built one of the largest overland energy networks in history through Central Asia. Pipelines from Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, and Kazakhstan feed natural gas directly into China's Xinjiang region. Known as lines A, B, and C, these pipelines already deliver around 55 billion cubic meters of gas annually. A fourth line, line D, is planned to add another 30 billion cubic meters, pushing the total capacity of this Central Asian corridor past 80 billion cubic meters per year. Alongside this, an oil pipeline from Kazakhstan stretches over 2,200 kilometers, moving crude directly across land, completely avoiding maritime routes. To the north, the relationship with Russia has yielded the Power of Siberia pipeline. This massive infrastructure project runs over 3,000 kilometers from Russia's Far East into China. It began delivering gas in 2019 and is ramping up to its full capacity of 38 billion cubic meters per year. Plans for a second route, Power of Siberia 2, could add another 50 billion cubic meters annually, further anchoring China's energy supply to its northern neighbor. To the south, China is investing heavily in the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, CPEC, centered around the port of Gwadar. The concept mirrors the Myanmar strategy: bring oil by sea to Gwadar, then move it overland to China's Xinjiang region. However, the challenges here are even greater. The distance is over 3,000 kilometers, and the route crosses the Karakoram Range, one of the highest and most dangerous mountain ranges on Earth. Building a pipeline here is technically daunting and politically complex, which is why progress has been slower than in Myanmar or Central Asia.
Inside China, all these external arteries connect to a massive domestic circulatory system. China has constructed over 100,000 kilometers of internal oil and gas pipelines. This network links coastal import terminals, inland refineries, and industrial zones, allowing energy to flow in multiple directions.
If gas supplies from Central Asia dip, the system can redirect flows from the coast or from Russia. If oil enters through Myanmar, it can be moved north to support inland industries or east to supplement coastal supplies. This integration is the true genius of China's strategy. It is not about finding one perfect route, it is about creating redundancy. By diversifying its sources, Middle East via sea, Russia via land, Central Asia via land, Myanmar via land, China ensures that no single point of failure can cripple its economy.
The Malacca Dilemma has not been eliminated, but it has been diluted. The Strait of Malacca remains vital, but it is no longer the only option. The Myanmar pipeline, despite its limitations and risks, plays a crucial role in this diversified portfolio. It proves that when a superpower faces a strategic chokehold, it doesn't just accept the vulnerability, it builds its way out of it, 1 kilometer of pipe at a time. The question now is not whether these pipelines can completely replace sea routes, but whether they provide enough insurance to deter aggression and ensure stability. In a world where energy is power, China has decided that relying on a single path is a risk it can no longer afford. The era of the single choke point is over. The era of the integrated network has begun.
The Strait of Malacca is often described not just as a waterway, but as the jugular vein of the Asian economy. It is a narrow, winding stretch of sea sandwiched between the Malay Peninsula and the Indonesian island of Sumatra. At its tightest pinch point, the strait is barely 2.7 kilometers wide. Yet through this slender corridor flows the lifeblood of modern industry: crude oil. China, the world's largest importer of crude oil, brings in more than 10 million barrels every single day. A staggering portion of this energy, historically close to 80%, travels by sea from the Middle East and Africa, passing directly through this choke point before reaching China's eastern coastal ports. For decades, this maritime route was the undisputed artery of China's economic rise, but it also represented a profound strategic vulnerability known as the Malacca Dilemma.